Welcome to Kotlin Beginner Series. Topic is functions. So how to define a function in Kotlin? We define a function in Kotlin with the keyword function, function name, some name and arguments, argument name and argument type and return type and body of the function. So we call this function like this, passing this string and then it and that returns the name. So there is so many ways to define a function. Maybe there is defining a function in short forms, and that one of is single expression function. When this is single expression function, because this just returning the name. So in this case we can omit this braces and return statement. This is one of the short form of defining a function. Just we can omit this, and also we can omit the return type, and Kotlin infers the right hand side expression type and infers the assigned value type to a return type. So this is the short form of defining a function in Kotlin. We can omit the return type and we can just pass that single expression functions. We can pass a value to that. So that is, function doesn't need to declare return type, and compiler infers the type and omit the braces and return keyword. So member functions, the functions defined in a interface or class, and those functions are called member functions, like this. So this will be referred by instance of that class if it is defined as a companion object, and it can just refer on the type itself. So define inside a class or interface. So local functions. The local functions are which are defined to do a specific functionality. We define a function inside a function as a nested function. I should have taken I mean real-time example, but okay. So anyway, we will go with this. And I will define a function. It is a nested function. Some or add or something some I it returns I star j, right? So surplus. So this is nested function, and then it prints the value. So function name is executes, and this function the prints the value. So to do some kind of functionality, when we expect the function to do some functionality, and the functionality is can be performed by nested functions, and then get the desired results. Those functions are called local functions. So nested functions, scope of the function is local, and then it cannot be visible. It is those functions are not visible outside the functions. Top level function. Top level functions in Kotlin we provide that feature is called when it when a functions declared under a file, those functions not required to declared in a class. So it can be declared in a file, and those functions are called top level functions. So these functions are top level functions, and the scope of function depending on that access modifier there. So if it is the access modifier is by default, we can give internal, so it is to that module, and then by default is internal. Entire this module it will be visible. So depends on access modifier. If it is public and it is visible to entire application, if it is internal, if it is visible to the only module. So if we want to access this function in another package, and we can just import and use it. But this is the top level functions. A Kotlin creates as a static function of a class. So Kotlin creates the static function with the file name kt, and then this function as a static function of that class. But when we call this, we don't need to qualify that class name. This function can be called directly. So these functions are called top level functions. So declare at top level in a file, don't need to define a class to hold it, and needs to import a call to call a function from the other packages. So named parameters. So these are all called named parameters. This is the argument name, and it gives now it is I'm not these are all called named parameters. So function will have two types of parameters in Kotlin. One is positional parameters, another is key parameters. So now I'm just there is one argument I am passing value to this as a positional parameter. So I can pass the value as a key parameter, that is qualifying that argument and then passing that. So that is key parameters, and I can provide a default value to this. So when I provide a default value to that, and I don't need to pass as an argument, and then so I don't need to pass the argument and default will be taken. So then explicit naming arguments when I pass to a function, and default parameters, default values, and provided default values for arguments for the function, and default value sets if arguments are not passed. So extension functions, we have framework classes, and we have a user defined classes, so we can add a method to it. So when framework classes, we don't have access to add a method, right? So we don't have access to modify the class to add a method, but so Kotlin provides that we can add a method to that user defined classes. For example, so I have a mutable list class in this library, Java utility library, or we can Kotlin in this. We have a mutable list framework class. So actually mutable list is class, and if we want to remove a element from the list, we can call remove on that. Drop a item, can call remove on that. There is a framework, mutable list has got that method called remove. Sorry. And it returns boolean. But I want to just do this remove functionality, but the method is new method, and drop there is no method called drop in list mutable list class, but I am adding to now. So this is called extensions. We can add a method to a class. Then so I created the list, and then I am calling that drop now. So it is called and returned a true, but for the sake of knowing it, and I am just printing drop called. So method drop called is printed. So this is called extensions, where we add a method to a framework class. We can add a method like this. To add a method to a framework class and user defined class, extension cannot be overridden. So remove is existing, the method, the immutable list class has got remove method, so we can't extend that method. If we extend this method, won't, it will ignore that. Ignores a Kotlin compiler ignores that method. So that method never called, it calls only framework method. See that the print statement is not printed here. So when you extend a function with the existing method name, then extensions those extensions will be ignored, so that those extension functions cannot be overridden. And member extensions can be defined in a class, but scope is limited to the class context. So when we enclosed in a class, so that extended function only can be called in the context of the class, so it cannot be called now. So if I try to call this drop, and if I try to call this, and it gives error, there is no drop method is there, so it is not in the context of the class. So I define a function and remove item. Maybe you can define as instant variable of that. So I can call this now. So drop method call. So that is the thing. And so when I called an instance of that, and it is calling in the context of that. So this method is defined in the context of the class, and then so that it is can be the scope of this extension function is the context of the class. And member extension functions can be overridden. So that means I can extend this class So in Kotlin, we need to, if some to allow child classes to extend this class, and I need to open it. I need to open the methods. And this one I'm not opening it, but I'll move to here for better understanding. Now I will override this. Which one? This one. And the same functionality. See that child class is called. So these extension function can be overridden by the child classes. And extension functions can also be added to companion objects. Function int companion dot random. So I'm adding that got framework class int, and there is a companion object. I'm adding method to that. So return random next int. So it can be called like just like this, int random. So it can be called on the type, so because it's companion object. And one is multiple return values. So if you want to return a function multiple return values, then I want this function to multiple return values function, and I can keep it in array. That is, I can refer a number of elements, and I can keep it in a class as a instance variables, so that the number of variables the data can be passed and more than one value. So but there is Kotlin compiler provides us that pair data type. So it returns two values, returns two values, so that can be, say, some math function, square root of whatever the value here passed, and then k2 double. So I return as two, one is root and negative of the root. So this is the pair class. We can so I can print this as a first as a root, what's happening this, no value passed for the parameter, and this is, and I can print and pair of second. So one more is that infix functions. Class account and say balance some. So I have a function called add. I add a credit double, and that it will add to the balance and return the credit. So when I invoke this account instance and then add and then some 100, so it will add to that. And so if you place infix, I can just add like this. Okay, so for the sake of convenience and to look, to look more meaningful, so I can just like this. So it adds, so that when you place infix and the function as an operand between these two and class instance and then amount, so that is the infix keyword does for us.